When you're trying to make a change or trying to upgrade, sometimes you have to take a pause.
You do.
And yet, like I said, edit and refine. With podcasts, you're always juggling three things. You're juggling the guests that you are trying to schedule a pre-interview with, the guests that you've already pre-interviewed that you are working on an outline to record with, and the guests you've already recorded with who you are working on their episode, getting it to go live. And that's every week. So you're juggling those three every week. So it's very hard to make changes and to make upgrades and edits when you are doing that juggle. And it's just me here. I have you to help me with the technical side, but otherwise everything with my guests begins and ends with me. You are listening to Humanity Unlocked. Welcome back, everyone. I am your host, Kimberly Daya, and this episode today will be our official wrap on season 2. I have my husband Mark back with us today to do something I call looking back to look forward. And rather than sitting here at a mic by myself, which is what I had planned to do originally, I decided to make it a bit more of a conversation instead of a monologue, to use Mark's word. There was so much that I took notes on that I wanted to cover in this episode, and I just sent him my notes and I said, can you help me formulate a conversation out of this? And so he did, thankfully, because I have been so bogged down with other stuff. I have not been able to make a proper outline. So I'm actually going to toss the baton to Mark on this and have him sort of help me through this episode as we wrap up season 2, because there are a few other announcements we're going to make. So.
Yep. Okay. So, well, let me ask you something. Looking back on the season, how would you describe it? If you were to use one word, what would you call season 2?
Transitional is the word I would use.
How so?
Because season 1 was, many of the topics were rooted in trauma, and not all, but many, and maybe perhaps a little less relatable to the listeners. Mm-hmm. And so with season 2, I tried to lighten it up a bit to where it still had the element that I look for, which is that element of feeling misunderstood, mm-hmm. and sort of unlocking humanity behind an issue that maybe somebody would feel judged for. So I always still look for that element, but the topics themselves were a little less lighter. And then also too, You
mean the topics were a little bit more light? Like on season 2.
Oh, did I say less lighter?
Yeah.
Sorry. Topics were lighter. Sorry. It's still early for me.
That's why you have your coffee.
That's why I have my coffee. But yeah, and I was just trying out a few different things. I actually did, because I was a little pickier with what I was doing. I was saying no to a lot of topics and people, because I was having a lot of requests to repeat topics that we'd already covered. And I think for this podcast, because we're so new, mm-hmm. I'm trying to vary it up as much as I can so we don't get sort of pigeonholed into one area. So with that came the need to maybe interject episodes where it was you and I, or me and one of the kids, or me and my mom, because I am reserving my right to be a little more particular otherwise you're going to get, or we would have gotten, I would say, a lot of episodes about maybe abuse or addiction, or a lot of episodes about motherhood or parenting or marriage. And it would have been like all sort of in those areas, because those are the areas that people wanted to talk about most. And so I had to make a decision. And so it was very transitional.
So that's what I was going to ask. So why are you, so if there was a lot of, requests on those particular topics, why did you feel the need to transition away from that?
Because the podcast is not about any one area. It's an umbrella, mm-hmm. that many topics fall beneath. If you look at the website, there's, I don't know how many, like 20 different topics or so that we would speak about. But because we're so new, we started season 2 90 days in, I believe. Maybe right. Less than that, 60 days maybe. And because we're so new, I wanted to create a foundation that was as wide as possible, because the more you do one topic, the more you're going to attract you're going to
Well, you're definitely
attract.
going to pigeonhole yourself, right?
Right.
You know, but I mean, that could be a good thing. That could be a bad thing because, you know, they always say riches are in the niches.
Right.
And if you know, go deep into one area, you might do well, but that's not kind of who you are.
So that's been a conversation too, whether or not to develop a niche, but I struggle with that because there's not one area that I'm especially attached to. Like, you know, if I were to pick one area, if I had to, I guess
Wait,
I would
let me guess. Relationships.
communication within
There you
relationships.
go.
Yeah. So that would be the area. And I mean, that's still very broad,
Yeah.
but, you know, it's tough because, like I said, the more you do episodes, if I do two, I try to limit it to no more than 3 in a season on around the, or I would say in a quarter, let's just say, on the same topic.
So, well, with the episodes that you did in season 2, this transitional phase or this transitional season, what would you say? What episodes, one or more than one episode, do you feel like best represented? You know, that's this transition.
So using the same element that I look for, which is the element where people often feel misunderstood, and trying to sort of parse through and hash out those feelings and clear up any confusion maybe on that. We were still trying to keep that as much as possible. So a really good example of that was when I had the girls from In the Pink Room on, and we talked about motherhood, because that topic is very diverse in terms of like how people approach motherhood and their decisions about how they parent and how they mother. And so that was, but it was still light enough, and it's also pretty relatable. And so like we talked about like breastfeeding over over 2 years old. We talked about co-sleeping, things like that people get judged for. So it still contained all those elements or that one element that I look for, but in many different areas. The whole, with Jordan, 50-50 custody. I mean,
That's a big one.
That's a big one because people would automatically assume one of two things on that. And it cleared up a lot. I think for a lot of people who are going through that, my heart goes out to them, because I mean, your heart just sinks into your stomach when you think about sharing your child. But we were able to really open up a conversation about that. Maya on antidepressants, even Lupe with, her physical ambition, with that, a lot, she can get judged for that because, I think anybody that's doing anything really spectacular with their life, automatically people judge them
very much so.
for it. So a little less stigmatized topics.
Well, so therefore, do you think that maybe season 2 is more relatable than season 1 because of that?
It's hard to say. Because it was still so transitional, I don't know that we got a really good sample size. I got what I got, you get, and it, for me, it's like, I don't head tap people, or poach people to come on. Rarely ever do I. I may put a feeler out there and see if they were to respond. Like I may say something like, oh gosh, I would love to talk with you about this on the podcast if you were ever interested. I may say something like that. And if they respond, then great. Yeah. Like I had a girl, a woman who, she has adult ADHD, and I said that she talks a lot about it. So she's very public with it. Mm-hmm. And I said it in the comments of one of our posts, and she said, absolutely, I would love that. Great. So now we're in a conversation about her coming on. But as far as like, if you think about how predatory that would feel to approach somebody who's maybe had infidelity within their marriage or has eating disorder.
Exploitative.
Exploitive. Yeah. So it's like you have to be careful. And when you have more of those lighter topics like motherhood or like relationships or whatever, those are much easier to reach out to and ask them to come on. When you're asking someone to come on and tell their trauma story, it feels very predatory. So I get what I get. And so with season 2, I was able to, some of the people I got, like David, when he came on and talked about dating and relationships, I got him through a previous guest. In dating and relationships, that's a pretty easy. So I, actually, he reached out to me. He was referred to me, but I would have reached out to him. I got Maya through you. I got Lupe through, she's my trainer. And so I'm trying to remember the other aside from our family, but I got what I got. So had I gotten other ones, I would have loved to have create a larger sample size to see how they did. But I think that, again, transitional. So. But to be honest, I think those topics did well. I think that I pulled in a different demographic in terms of listenership that would have normally in season 1 maybe not have been interested in the content. So it's now become about more balancing those two types of demographics, because the demographic that came to me in season 2 would not have necessarily chosen my podcast in season 1, and vice versa.
Well, that's interesting. So I got a question for you about that. Do you, I'm already wrestling with the answer in my head as I'm asking the question, because you're talking about the interest level of season 1 versus season 2 and the different nature of the topics for sure. But you happen to be the common thread with all of it, right? And how much of the interest in the topics have to do with the topics themselves, or is it maybe you and what you bring to the table, and maybe just the kind of I don't know if you want to call it the atmosphere that you're able to bring, or the open honesty that you're able to bring to the table on maybe especially in season 1, because you're dealing with more trauma related stuff. But I think that I'll speak for myself. When I listen to podcasts, I'm driving in the car or whatever, listening to something, I found myself being gravitated towards the host and what the host's interests are. Now, at first, I'm not there because of that. I'm interested in the topics. But then, you get to know the host, you get to like and trust the host, and then, they start rubbing off on you.
Right.
And then that person, so you start having that attachment. It's a weird word, but you like that person, and so you kind of respect them, and therefore you respect their interests as well. And if they take the right approach to being the host, asking the questions, providing valuable insight, because maybe that's why you like that host, then it grows.
You become a loyal listener.
You become a loyal, yeah, I guess you become a loyal listener, and you are just open to all the topics that come, whether it's season 1 related or season 2 related. So, what do you have in mind for season 3? Do you have any changes?
I'm still working that out, but I think that works really well when you are an established podcast personality, and I'm still establishing myself.
You mean you're not Joe Rogan?
I'm not, but using him as an example, he's a very good example to use him with my son. My son is a very big Joe Rogan fan. He has been since high school. He loves UFC. He loves comedies, like the perfect podcaster. Seriously, for Jordan.
It's true.
So it's only natural and also fitness. But Jordan will listen to every single Joe Rogan episode, regardless of what the topic, regardless from start to finish, because he is a loyal listener. I have episodes that I listen to of different podcasts where I will listen to just about every episode regardless, but I am a little bit more choosy than he is. And I don't know, it really depends, because I have my favorite podcasts. I don't know that I listen to every single episode on my favorite podcast. So I do think they are a little bit topic driven. I do think obviously having a connection with the host helps, which is why I started doing more of that, because that was some feedback I was getting, like, hey, we need to get to know you. You need to do your own interview, and so I did have you on a couple times. I had the kids on, trying to have the listeners connect with me more. But in terms of topics, like, if you think about the kind of person who would listen to, in season 1, listen to like Heather's episode, for example, on faith, like that's not going to be everybody, regardless of, who, because I'm so new, they might skip that one. Or Rochelle's episode on homelessness. A lot of people will skip that one. People don't want to be convinced any other way. So
those are 2 really good episodes. Right.
But what I'm saying is that over time, when you gain a stronger listenership, then they may go back and listen to those. But yeah, it's very much, I think, still driven by the topic, and people pick and choose based on that. But I think really my listenership, I have two totally different demographics. The ones I got from season 1 and the ones I got from season 2. And some of that comes from the guests that I have on. A lot of it will depend on how much they've shared their personal episode, but some of it doesn't. Some of it's topic driven, like Jordan's, for example. His is one of my highest performing, and he maybe shared it once, I think. So that one was very much topic driven. That was a very high in demand subject to talk about, a 50-50 custody. So it's hard to know, but for this coming up season, it's in season 3. I'm still working out my approach on that one.
I mean, in general, behind the scenes kind of question. How do you come up with your topics? Is it one of those things where maybe you're a little bit more on the passive side because it's kind of depends on what guests come your way, or how do you pick up on the topics?
Well, on one hand, yes, it's had to be, because, right, like I don't, for me to go and poach people.
Yeah.
You could do that, but I won't do it, I on certain subjects.
Yeah. Tell me your story about alcoholism. I want to know everything about it. Like, yeah.
Now sometimes I'll get referred by somebody, and they'll say, hey, like, for example, the episode I did do on alcoholism, a woman I work out with at the gym, she knew my guest, Michelle. And she asked Michelle, hey, do you want to be on Kim's podcast? And Michelle said, yes, have her contact me. And so I contacted her. Yeah. But I do have a lot of people who will say, hey, I know the perfect person to talk about this. And my response is usually give them my email and have them reach out to me. I'm not going to talk to somebody unless I know already that they've agreed to it. So it's had to be about, as far as how I get my topics, it's had to be about who contacts me or who's referred to me, or it's about what, I don't know that I've done any topics that I wanted to do I haven't, without a guest, except for the ones maybe I've done with my family. But those don't, even those,
But those are good topics too, even the one with Jasmine, obviously Jordan.
I will say there are about 3 or 4 topics that I would love to do episodes on that I have not been able to because I haven't had anybody, reach out to me. So I get what I get,
Yeah.
So
do you mind if I ask what those topics are?
I just, off the top of my head, I just mentioned before, I would love to do one on infidelity, the choice to stay or the choice to go. That would be, to me, a really interesting episode. And then I would love to do one on eating disorders, like anorexia, having a long bout with an eating disorder, because I think those are very much misunderstood. And I'm sure there's a couple others, but those 2 remain at the, top of mind, that I've always really wanted to, because I personally have interest in those areas, and I would love to be able to talk to somebody about their experience. And I think they fall within our, what we look for. So, yeah.
Well, do you think that you've got okay, here's what I'm kind of focused in on for you. And this is just because I'm so biased. Obviously, I've known you forever, right? And, being your husband and everything, we communicate a lot, and I know what you're naturally good at. The thing that your superpower is, communication skills and understanding people. I think that, I don't want to say you're an armchair psychologist, because that's almost like a derogatory term. But the reality is that, you missed your calling, right? Like, that could have been you for sure.
You don't think this is my calling?
Well, but this is adjacent. Right. Because you don't have a degree, right? But this is adjacent to that. And meaning, and this is exactly my point, actually,
right?
Which is that it's bringing that element, bringing kind of the wisdom that you naturally have, to the table, and, to have deep discussions with people about things. And I would love to see more of you. Yes, you interview other people, but I would just, I want to hear more of your take on things, more of, I don't want to say you're going to be the counselor because that's, not your
No.
place. Right. But dang it, like you've got a lot of smart things to say. And I like to hear like your take on,
I think that
especially relationships and communication.
I think you're very biased. I think
Totally.
that it would be, yeah. I appreciate it though. No, I've always said from the beginning that I don't want the podcast to be about me. And now I understand with the more education I'm getting that I am, like they say, like you are your brand, like whatever. So I know that I have to be at the center of everything. I get it, but I couldn't do this without my guests. So I perhaps, in the future that would be something that I would look to do more of, like more of a Q&A type style thing. But the truth is I'm not credentialed. I'm not, I don't have any kind of special, but training or wisdom or whatever. I just have my own take on things, which is usually pretty neutral. But and people do get that. I feel like in the episodes that I have done, it's not as if I shy away from sharing, what my take is on certain things. Like once again, which is usually pretty neutral. And it's usually trying to get people to look at things from a side that may be a little bit less popular.
Yeah. Well, I think so for many people, the instinct is to, form an opinion very quickly before they have all the facts. Clearly we see that all around us. Mm-hmm. And then, make a judgment. And I think what you do is you take your time and you unpack a topic, ask really deep, questions. And then what that initial judgment may have been will quite often is wrong on many of these topics like homelessness and, all the other things that you talked about. And the net result is I think everybody is able to gain, some knowledge and some wisdom. And I think it's not about like, hey, what do I think about this? What do I think about that? It's more like, how do you go about thinking about things? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think, showing, your
process,
how you process and how you lean into your curiosity really opens things up. And, we always say like, shoot, if you were, in those person's shoes and you were faced with the same environment growing up or the same pressures going against you at that moment in time, whenever that may have been your weak moment or whatever that is. I mean, you may have ended up being exactly the same position of the person that you're judging now.
People always like to think that they would have somehow known to do it differently. But so that's, in which we've spoke about that before, but that is that's what we see a lot of, which is the whole reason we have the podcast. So it's to put, for our listeners to put themselves in our guest shoes and to see like, okay, if you were given these circumstances with a lot, whatever they may be, do you really think you would have had the wherewithal or the resources to choose anything, something different, Mm-hmm. We also too have a specific genetic bucket that, I've heard that term recently, genetic bucket. You have what you have, to work with, and not that you can't build upon that, but we're not all created equally that way either. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
That's interesting. That's a good point. Never thought about that either. So going into the end of season 2 and then towards the beginning of season 3, what are you going to be working on to bring season 3? I know I asked you a little bit about the topics that you were thinking, but what else?
Well, a couple things. One is I am strongly considering the whole niche aspect, whether or not, I've heard it described before. A niche is like my YouTube watchers can see, but my listeners can't. But a niche is like the top of a triangle, the point, the top point of a triangle. And then as you gain experience with that niche, you can branch out and create more and become wider with your content. And typically starting out with a niche sort of helps to, what happens is your followers, your listeners, they all know what they're getting. They're subscribing to, like, if you were to think about like a real estate podcast.
Yeah, well, you get a solid base.
Yeah, people that are going to subscribe to a real estate podcast know what they're getting. They're going to get tips and advice and about real estate adjacent. If you were to subscribe to a pop culture podcast, same thing. Like there is so many astrology, same thing. You're going to get, you're not going to get something that is out of left field on those podcasts.
Right.
So the idea with a niche is you develop a very strong, as you were speaking about before, loyal listener base who are coming to you for that reason. But it also limits you. So it's like kind of like I'm doing this weighing out. So with that said,
But
yes.
First, brought to you by Sac Platinum Realty.
Where did that come from?
Well, talking about real estate podcasts and everything like
yes,
that,
yes.
and we needed to have a little sponsor, so that's this podcast sponsor right now.
This is for sure brought to you by Sac Platinum Realty. Well, Mark Dyer specifically is the one funding this gig. Our season 3 goes. There's going to be some editing and refining that we're going to be doing. Everything from branding to production and just the content in general for future episodes, which topics we want to cover, the guests that we want to have on. I'm going to be taking advantage of, I've had a lot of options come my way that.
Well, you got to fill the bank, right?
Right.
We got to get some episodes logged in and then so that way you could have a consistent release schedule.
I think it's really easy to fill the bank when you're just continuing on with what you've always done. But when you're trying to make a change or trying to upgrade, sometimes you have to take a pause.
You do.
And and edit, like I said, edit and refine. There's with podcasts, you're always juggling 3 things. You're juggling the guests that you are trying to schedule a pre-interview with, the guests that you've already pre-interviewed that you are working on an outline to record with, and the guests you've already recorded with who you are working on their episode, getting it to go live. And that's every week. So you're juggling those 3 every week. So it's very hard to make changes and to make upgrades and edits when you are doing that juggle. And it's just me here. I have you to help me with the technical side, but otherwise everything with my guests begins and ends with me. So that's where we're at. If you're a listener, if you're interested in either being a guest or if you have an idea for a topic that you'd like me to cover, send me an email or do an inquiry through the website. All that info will be in the show notes and we'll go from there. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this conversation, please give it a like and leave me a comment. I want to know what you guys think. Also, if you're looking for more information about how to be a guest on the show, please go to our website at humanityunlockedpodcast.com. We only record shows in person and we are located in Sacramento, California. Oh, and if you're not subscribed, make sure you tap that button so you can get updated on weekly episodes as they go live. Is that it? I think that's it. See you guys next time.